The lateral wall of the nasal cavity has a much more complex structure than the septum. Three prominent elevations, the superior, middle, and inferior conchi, narrow the nasal passages and create a large surface area, forcing inhaled air to swirl around and over them. This arrangement further helps in the warming and moistening of inhaled air. The conchi are projections of bone from the lateral wall of the nasal cavity covered by mucous membrane. The spaces around the conchi are called the meatuses. The inferior meatus lies below and lateral to the inferior concha. The middle meatus lies below and lateral to the middle concha, and the superior meatus lies below and lateral to the superior concha. The space above the superior concha is the sphenoethmoidal recess. The sensory receptors for smell are located in the olfactory epithelium at the superior aspect of the nasal cavity. Odors in inhaled air are bound by the receptor cells, which, in turn, signal the olfactory bulb and olfactory regions of the brain. The four nasal sinuses, the frontal, ethmoidal, sphenoidal, and maxillary sinuses, are continuous with the nasal cavity. The openings, or ostia, through which the sinuses communicate with the nasal cavity are obscured by the overlying conchi, but are visible following removal of the conchi. The frontal sinus drains through a funnel-like tunnel, or infundibulum, into the upper end of the hiatus semilunaris, a shallow depression in the lateral wall of the middle meatus. The ethmoidal air cells drain into the nasal cavity in at least three locations. The anterior cells drain anterior to the hiatus semilunaris. The middle air cells drain into one or more openings in a bubble-like structure, the ethmoidal bulla, and the posterior air cells drain via one or more openings into the superior meatus. The sphenoidal air sinus drains through one or two openings into the sphenoethmoidal sinus. The maxillary sinus drains into the middle meatus through an opening in the inferior part of the hiatus semilunaris. The maxillary sinus was poorly designed for animals that walk upright. The drainage opening is usually near the top of the sinus, so the sinus has to fill completely before it can begin to drain. A fifth opening into the inferior meatus is the drainage site for the nasolacrimal duct. This duct carries overflow tears from the eye into the nasal cavity, which is why our nose runs when we laugh hard or cry. Sensory innervation of the lateral wall of the nasal cavity is supplied by lateral nasal branches from the anterior